the meeting wasn't allowing anyone that wasn't signed in Zoom.
Okay. Okay. Aisha, are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So, what is the last thing that you people have written in your notebooks?
I'm growth dependent and growth independent. And then we wrote like the plants use electrical, chemical.
This part only, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, I have to teach you the independent movements, isn't it? All right. So today we're going to talk about the growth independent movements. The other name that you can refer to growth independent movement is the nastic movements. Okay. Now here, why is it called as the growth independent movement? It's because once the stimulus has been provided, okay, we know that whenever a stimulus is provided, there is a certain direction of the stimulus, isn't it? Meaning from where the stimulus comes from. So now in like once the stimulus has been provided, then a response is generated. Now when the response is not dependent on the direction of the stimulus, then that kind of a movement in plant is known as a growth independent movement or nastic movements. How many of you have heard about touch me not plants? Everyone? Okay, great. You know, its scientific name is Mimosa pudica. Now, what is so special about touch me not plant? Like whenever you touch it, it starts folding its leaves, isn't it? So the stimulus that you are providing to it is a touch, isn't it? And in response to that stimulus which has been provided, is it opening towards you or is it closing away from you? It's closing away from you, right? So for example, the direction of the stimulus was this, and the plant was supposed to open, or let's just say stay open towards you, right? But what did it do? It closed itself, right? The leaves, they folded out. So that kind of a movement is a nastic movement, which was shown by the Mimosa pudica. Okay. All right. Just give me 1 second, students. All right. So coming back to it. So yeah. So here the kind of you can say stimulus that was provided to the plant, it was a touch, and touch is known as the thigmo, right? So here, since it is a nastic movement, so we'll call it as thigmonastic movement, and it is shown by Mimosa pudica, that is touch me not plant. So if we read out loud, so the like these movements, they occur in response to the environmental stimuli, but the direction of the response is not dependent on the direction of the stimulus. It doesn't mean, like, for example, like how when like you people might remember from the initial classes that once I was talking to you about stimulus, response, effectors and everything. So I gave one example of someone patting at your back, isn't it? I said if someone would pat at your back, what would you do? You'll turn towards that person, right? You'll turn
My
towards.
voice is stucking a little.
Hmm? Is it fine now? Can you people hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, everyone can hear me. Maha, fix like you can maybe try to switch up the volume. Maybe that would help because all of you are able to hear me fine. Yeah, so as I was saying that in the previous classes, I had taught you about the stimulus and the responses. So in that, I gave you one particular example as to if someone pats at your back, the initial response would be to turn towards that person, isn't it? So the movement or the response is in the direction of the stimulus that had been provided. But in the case of plants, particularly the nastic movements, or you can say the growth independent movement, Here, the response is not dependent on the direction of the stimulus. It is independent of it. Is this example and the whole entire growth independent movement clear to everyone? Does anyone have any doubts related to this? And when you're studying about it, always remember the scientific name of touch me not plant, which is Mimosa pudica. Now moving forward, we'll be talking about the growth related movement. Now these are the movements that are actually dependent on the direction of stimulus. Just like how independent movements were those that were not dependent on the direction of the stimulus, but now these are dependent on the direction of the stimulus. So here the best example is of the pea plant. Now have you people ever heard about climbers? Climbers and creepers? You people have heard about it? Yeah. So when you talk about the climbers and the creepers, what happens is that as soon as you provide them with a support, for example, if the support is a stick or if it is a fence or another plant, so what they do, they start wrapping around it, isn't it? So that they can get support to stand erect. Because we know that the climbers or the creepers, they are not strong enough to stand upright, isn't it? Yeah. So one such example of the growth dependent movement is pea plant climb up other plants or fences with the help of their tendrils. You might have seen these spring-like structures that come out of the plant. Those are the tendrils of the plant. And with the help of tendrils only, they wrap around anything for support. Now, these tendrils that are there in the plants, they are sensitive to touch because, like, for example, even if you put your finger there and stand there for a while, like for 2 to 3 days, just like that, they will wrap around your finger also. So they need a support so that they can wrap around. And how are they able to wrap around? They are able to wrap around because they are sensitive to touch. Clear? Any doubts up until now, students? All right. Moving forward, see, if we talk about the one more thing, students. Just like how the growth independent movements, they were called as the nastic movements, right? But here, the growth related or growth dependent movements, they are known as tropic movements. Okay, so those were nastic movement and this is tropic movement. Now, moving forward, talking about the tropic movements, they are directional, meaning they can be positive, they can be negative in terms of their direction. Now, I'd like to give you one example. For example, if this is a soil, okay, you took a seed and you planted the seed over here. Now, if I ask you the direction of the growth of roots, what would you say? Upwards or downwards?
For roots, downwards.
Okay. So for roots, it grows towards the ground, right? Now, what about the stem? Upwards or downwards?
Upwards.
So the stem would go towards the upside, right? This is what happens. Everyone agrees with this? All right. Okay. Now, we said that the movements that are the tropic movements, they can be either, like you can say positive or they can be either negative. Now, if we talk about the stimulus being the sun. Okay, the stimulus is the sun. So, when the sun rays fall on the plant, the stem moves upwards and the root moves downwards. Right. So if we are talking about the stimulus sun, so that is known as photo, right? And we are talking about tropic movements. This will be known as phototropism, isn't it? Now, if we talk about the stem, is it like you can say towards the photo or against the photo? Means light. Towards the light or against the light?
Towards the light.
And what about roots? Towards the light or against the light?
Against.
against the light. So if we talk about the stem of the plant, so they are positively phototropic. But if we talk about the root of the plant, so they are negatively phototropic. Getting my point? Now, if I talk about gravity, how many of you know what gravity is? Everyone knows what gravity is? All of you have gravity? How many of you don't? How many of you float around on Earth? I hope no one, right? So yeah, we know that gravity is the downward force, right? Okay. Now, if we talk in terms of root and in terms of stem, now what do you think? The stem is against the gravity or towards the gravity?
Against.
And what about the roots? Against the gravity or towards the gravity?
Towards.
So now see, the stimulus that is gravity, we'll call it as geo. And we are talking about tropic movements, so geotropism. Okay. So if we talk about the stem, would they be positively geotropic or negatively geotropic? I have written only. They will be negative geotropic. Why? Because they are moving against the gravity, isn't it? They are moving upwards. The gravity acts downwards. But when we talk about the roots, since they are moving downwards, so we'd say they are positively geotropic. Getting my point? So this is how we would describe the tropic movements. And them being directional means one can be towards the stimulus and one can be away from the stimulus, right? So the phenomena which like shows tropic movement, we'll call it as tropism. And these are the types of tropic movements. We have phototropism, meaning the stimulus is the light. We have geotropism, meaning the stimulus is gravity. Then we have chemotropism, meaning the stimulus is chemicals. We have hydrotropism, the stimulus is water. Then we have thigmotropism, the stimulus is touch. So these are the various tropic movements that you would find in plants. Any doubts? This thing is clear? Yes. Okay, very good. Now you people can note it down, okay? Now you can switch off your videos, write down
So
count.
what are chemically dependent plants?
I'll tell you the example, don't worry. I'll tell you. Students, are you done?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. Done, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Done, students?